All right, let's go through the assignment questions. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll just kind of go through like a couple, maybe in each of the tougher ones here. So let's do C. And just a heads up, you got like for like A and these ones, it says Z is greater than or equal to zero. That's the restriction on a square root. It's just saying like what is Z allowed to be that would make this thing not a negative. So Z can be everything greater than or equal to zero to not be negative. Same with the next one down here. If we wanted to figure out what X was allowed to be, well, X is allowed to be greater than or equal to 4. Because if it was 3, let's say there was a 3 there, that would be 3 minus 4, that'd be negative 1. So we wouldn't be allowed to do that. So that's all that's kind of saying there. Our main concern when we square each expression is going to be the first part. All right, so let's do C. So if we had 2 root x plus 7. And it said to square that. So what we're doing is squaring it. Remember, when you square something, that applies to everything on the inside. So we're squaring this 2, and then we're squaring this as well. So like that square root. So what this turns into is 4. 2 squared is 4. And then when you square that square root, it just goes away. But don't forget to put the brackets there where you left. So it's going to be x plus 7. Right? You can't just like forget about the brackets because that would be a different expression. 4 times x plus 7 is different than 4 times x plus 7 in brackets. If you wanted to figure out what that was, you'd have to use the distributive property again. So just don't make that mistake with forgetting about the brackets, I'd say. Okay, so that was C. Let's do D. So D, if we start out with negative 4 times square root 9 minus 2y, and then this part's just saying y has to be less than or equal to 9 over 2 to make this thing positive under the square root. Okay, so if we square this though, then we have to square the negative 4, and we have to square the square root of 9 minus 2y. So if we do that, the square root of negative 4, squaring anything gives you a positive number. So the square root of a negative number is positive. So this is going to just be 16, and then times 9 minus 2y. And that's pretty much it. The only reason we did this was just kind of to get us ready for the solving type of questions. Because now for number 3 here, let's do 3, I'll do B first. Okay, so to do this one, I'll write that again. So square root negative 8x is equal to 4. Okay, so we want to get x on its own. The problem is it's kind of like trapped underneath the square root. So what I'm going to do is square it to get rid of that square root. But I can't just square one side, I have to square the other. So when I do that, on the left side now, I've just got negative 8x because the square kind of like canceled the square root. And then that's equal to 4 squared is 16. Okay, x is almost on its own. The only thing we got to do now is divide by negative 8. And I divided by negative 8 because you do the opposite of what's being done. Negative 8 was being multiplied by x. I'm going to divide by instead. So it's the opposite. So negative 8 divided by negative 8 is 1, so it's pretty much gone. But you have to do the same to the other side. So divide by negative 8 on this side. So in that case, we get x is equal to negative 2. So one thing I want to stress, though, is to check this. There could be tests or questions on tests where like you get an answer like this, and you're like, aha, that's letter B, and just like you'll circle it for your multiple choice. But then one of the answers might be none of the above because they were extraneous roots. So you need to check it. It's don't just all of a sudden say, yeah, that's it, and look for that answer on the test. You need to check it. Because it won't always be an answer. So to check it, what we're going to do is put it back into the original question. So let's try going square root of negative 8, and I'm going to put negative 2 instead of an x, and that's equal to 4. And then start working my way down. So I'm going to say, okay, negative 8 times negative 2 gives me positive 16 is equal to 4. And then, yeah, the square root of 16 is 4. So 4 is equal to 4. That checked out. So it did work that time, but it won't always. Okay, let's do C. So 7 is equal to square root of 5 minus 2x. Okay, so again, I need to get x on its own, but it's kind of trapped underneath that square root right now, so I need to get rid of that first. So let's square it, but then I have to square the other side. So we've got 7 squared is 49. Now on this side, we've just got 5 minus 2x. Now at this point, people make mistakes because they don't know which one to get rid of first, the 5 or the 2. Well, you have to get rid of the adding or subtracting part of it first. So the one that's kind of like, I think of it as being like farther away from the x, that's like the first to go. So 5 is just kind of hanging out there, and it's a positive 5 right now. So we need to subtract 5 from both sides. So minus 5, minus 5. So what we have now is 44 is equal to negative 2x. Last thing to do, divide by negative 2. Divide by negative 2, and we get x is equal to negative 22. So going back, we need to check this out though. So we've got 7 is equal to the square root of 5 minus 2 times negative 22. So we've got 7 is equal to the square root of 5. And now this is going to be, here I'll write it out, minus 2 times negative 22 is negative 44. So we've got minus a negative. That's really like, that's a positive, right? So we're going to add. So in this case, we've got 7 is equal to the square root of positive 49. Well, the square root of 49 is 7. So now we got 7 is equal to 7. So yeah, that checked out. But like I said before, it won't always. Okay, let's do C for 4. So we've got the square root of 3x minus 8 is equal to negative 6. So the way I would handle these ones, you could, if you want to get rid of the square, or the square root, sorry, you could square both sides like this. It would work out in the end. It's gonna be really complicated though, or it's gonna make things complicated. Because if you think about it, you'd have to expand this bracket part and then solve. It would work out. It would take a lot more steps for sure. But what I would do instead to make things simpler is I would just add 8 to both sides first. So that would get the 8 out of here first. So plus 8. And now what I'm left with is the square root of 3x is equal to 2. That's a lot easier to deal with. Now this is just like the questions we did above. Now I can just square both sides. And I've got 3x is equal to 4. And now I've got x is equal to 4 over 3. So let's verify our solution. So if I put that back, we've got square root of 3 and then times. And instead of an x, I'm going to write 4 over 3. Well, the 3's cancel now, right? That's one thing I'll take a moment actually just to kind of talk about that. So if I've got something like 3 times, a fraction like 4 over 3, some people get really confused by that and they don't know what to do with the fraction part of it there. This is exactly the same as saying 3 times 4 all over 3. It doesn't matter about that little that little fraction there is not like its own thing. 3 is in the denominator, and you're thinking about this 3 as being in the numerator, being on the top, so that it looks just like this. Just a different way of writing it. I know that confuses students. So if we go back here now, so if we've got the square root of 3 times 4 over 3, so just like I said, now you can think about you got 3 over top of 3, they're going to cancel. So that's going to just be the square root of 4. Minus 8 is equal to negative 6. So now I've got the square root of 4, which is 2, minus 8 is equal to negative 6. And then, yeah, that's negative 6 is equal to negative 6. So that checked out. Okay, let's do D. Negative 5 is equal to 2 minus square root negative 6m. Okay, what to do here? So let's get rid of that 2 hanging out there, like I said before. So I'm going to subtract 2 minus 2. So we've got negative 7 is equal to negative square root negative 6m. Now this negative up front confuses people, I know. Really all we got to do here now is think about this negative as negative 1, right? So if that's negative 1, then all we got to do is divide both sides by negative 1. And if I do that, the negative 1 divided by negative 1, they cancel. And I've got negative 7 divided by negative 1. That's just 7 is equal to square root negative 6m. And if you kind of see what happened there, if you get into this kind of situation, I'm just going to go back a step. If you get into this kind of situation where you've got a negative, and that's like a negative 7 there, and you want to switch it, all you ended up doing was switching the symbols. So I can just turn this into a positive as long as I turn this into a positive. Hopefully that made sense. The other way of thinking about it, I'm just going to kind of show you a bunch because I know different students have different ways that they like thinking about it, is I could subtract this whole, or sorry, I could add this whole thing here, square root minus 6m. So those would be 0. And then add square root negative 6m to this side. And now what I've got is negative 7 plus square root negative 6m is equal to, well, 0 is what's left over there. And then what I could do is add 7 to both sides. So plus 7, and now I've got square root of negative 6m is equal to 7. So all ended up the same way, right? The simplest one, though, is probably once you realize you're in this situation, is just to swap the symbols, if you know why. This is just kind of another reason why. Okay, so I'm at this point. Now it's just going to be just like it was. So you square this, you square this. We end up with negative 6m is equal to 49. And then m is going to be equal to 49 over negative 6. Oh, I said 6 and wrote 4. And this would also be right to say, negative 49 over 6. Or negative out front and then 49 over 6. People get confused sometimes about what the negative means too. Those three things all mean the same thing. I'll let you guys go ahead and try to put that back in to figure out if it's an extraneous root or not. Okay, so I'm going to end that video there, and I'll pick up with the rest of the questions in the next video.